Hey guys, tonight we're setting sail into a story that's been buried under centuries of mist, ice, and forgotten maps. Picture this. It's the tail end of a long day. Maybe your room is dimly lit, or you've got the soft glow of your screen reflecting off a wall in the dark. Outside there might be wind, just enough to make the trees whisper like they know something you don't. You're tired, maybe even a little restless, but as the night settles in, you decide to give your mind a break, and so you click play. You imagine yourself standing on the edge of a cold northern shore, wooden boots sinking slightly into damp earth. There's a salty breeze in the air, carrying with it the faint scent of pine and seaweed. Before you, the ocean stretches wide and gray beneath a sky streaked with clouds that move like slow-moving thoughts. Somewhere out there, past fog and time, lies a place few truly remember, even though it changed everything. And if you were actually there, hundreds of years ago, well, you probably wouldn't survive this. Maybe not from swordplay or monsters, but from something far more mundane, scurvy, exposure, or just plain homesickness. But none of that matters now, because tonight you're safe, curled up under a blanket, sipping tea or clutching a pillow like a life raft. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, if you want to share where you are and what time it is for you right now, drop it in the comments. It's oddly comforting to know people all over the world are winding down together. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. We begin our story around the year 985 AD. Greenland has just become home to Norse settlers, tough, weather-worn folks who had left Iceland behind in search of land that wasn't already packed with other Vikings. Among them was a man named Eric the Red, a name that sounds more like a warning than a nickname. He was exiled from Iceland for murder, which by Viking standards wasn't even that unusual. But he was also a dreamer, or perhaps just a very convincing liar, and he told anyone who'd listen that Greenland was lush, green, and ripe for settlement, which if you've ever seen Greenland, you know is about as accurate as calling the Sahara a bit nippy. Still, people followed him. They braved the icy waters, huddled in longships built for speed and survival, trusting that the horizon would deliver something better than what they left behind. And when they arrived, they found a land of glaciers, fjords, and rocks that could bruise your boots just by stepping on them. But they stayed, because going back wasn't an option. It was in this harsh, wind-swept corner of the world that Eric the Red's son was born. A boy destined to wander further than any of his ancestors dared. His name was Leif Erikson. Leif grew up surrounded by stories of adventure and exploration. He heard tales of distant lands whispered over hearth fires, passed down by sailors who claimed to have seen green shores beyond the western seas. Most dismissed these accounts as sailors' fever dreams, the kind of nonsense you tell after weeks at sea with nothing but salt water and stale bread to keep you company. But Leif believed them. Years later, as a grown man and seasoned explorer, Leif set out to find one of these rumored lands himself. He gathered a crew, stocked a ship, and sailed westward into the unknown. After many days at sea, days filled with creaking wood, endless waves, and the occasional whale breach in the distance, they spotted land, not Greenland, not Iceland, something new. They called it VINLAND. Now, why they chose that name is still debated by historians today. Some say it's because they found wild grapes growing there, Finn being Old Norse for wine. Others argue it's a mistranslation or exaggeration. Either way, Vinland sounded promising, fertile, inviting, like the opposite of Greenland. Life and his crew explored the coast, finding rivers teeming with salmon, forests thick with towering trees, and meadows bursting with wild flowers. Compared to the rocky, icy landscape of Greenland, it must have felt like paradise, or at least a decent upgrade. They built a small settlement, a temporary base made of timber and turf, somewhere along the coast. It wasn't meant to last forever, but it was enough to prove that this land was real, that they weren't just chasing myths. But life didn't stay long. He returned to Greenland with stories of Vinland, of its abundance and beauty, and like any good explorer, he inspired others to follow. Soon more ships were launched. More Norsemen set their sights westward, eager to stake their claim in this mysterious new land. Among them was Thorfinn Karlsefni, a wealthy merchant with ambition and a taste for adventure. He brought with him not just men but women and livestock too. This time they weren't just visiting, they were planning to stay. And for a while it worked. The Norse settlers built a larger village, complete with longhouses, storage sheds, and even a barn for the cows. They fished, they farmed, they traded. Life seemed peaceful. But peace, especially in uncharted lands, rarely lasts long, because they weren't set alone. There were others living in Vinland, indigenous peoples whom the Norse called Skrællingar, a term that roughly translates to wretched ones or foreigners. We don't know exactly who these people were. Some believe they were ancestors of the Beothuk or Inuit peoples, but we do know that encounters between the two groups were tense. At first, trade was possible. The Norse offered metal tools and weapons in exchange for animal hides and furs, but trust was fragile. Misunderstandings were common, and eventually violence broke out. Fights turned into skirmishes. Skirmishes turned into fear. Fear turned into abandonment. One by one, the Norse settlers decided it wasn't worth the risk. They packed up their belongings, boarded their ships, and sailed back east toward Greenland. Vinland was left behind, and with it, the memory of their presence began to fade. Back in Greenland, the settlement struggled. Climate changes made farming harder, trade routes weakened, and soon the idea of crossing the Atlantic to settle in Vinland became less appealing and eventually impossible. The knowledge of how to get there, of where exactly it was, disappeared with the passing generations. By the time European explorers began sailing west again 500 years later, this time led by Christopher Columbus, the Norse presence in North America had been all but erased, forgotten, buried under layers of myth and dust. Until much later, someone stumbled upon the ruins of a place that shouldn't have existed. A place made of stone and turf, hidden in Newfoundland, lawns of meadows. But that part of the story comes later. For now, you're still standing on that shore, watching the sun dip low over the water. The wind is picking up, rustling through the tall grasses. Your feet are cold, your hands are numb, but you feel something ancient and quiet, like the land itself remembers what happened here. Maybe it does. So close your eyes. Let the sound of the waves lull you. Imagine the long ships pulling into the bay, the laughter of explorers, the crackle of campfires in the dark. Feel the chill of the northern air wrap around you like a heavy blanket and drift. You're still standing on that shore, the wind tugging at your cloak, the sun dipping lower until the sky glows amber and violet. The longships have vanished into history, their wooden hulls rotted away or buried beneath centuries of soil. But the land remembers. It always does. And somewhere deep in the roots of the trees, in the layers of peat and stone, the story of Vinland is waiting to be unearthed. Fast forward nearly 1,000 years. The year is 1960. You're not a Viking anymore. You're a Norwegian explorer named Helge Ingstad, and you've spent your life chasing stories, half-truths, whispered in libraries, fragments of sagas scribbled in old Icelandic manuscripts. You've read about Vinland, of course. Every adventurer worth their salt has, but most dismiss it as legend, a fairy tale for sailors and dreamers. Still, you're stubborn, or maybe just bored. Either way, you find yourself in Newfoundland, standing on a windswept stretch of coastline called Landsog Meadows, asking locals if they've ever seen anything unusual. They point you toward the hills. There, half buried beneath moss and lichen, are strange ridges in the earth, not natural formations, not animal burrows, something else. You dig, slowly at first, then faster, your fingers brushing against stones arranged in deliberate patterns, wooden beams preserved in the peat, turf walls, foundations, the unmistakable outlines of buildings. Yusuf found something. But what? Back in Norway, your wife, archaeologist Anne Stein Ingstad, leads the excavation. She and her team work methodically, brushing away dirt, mapping the site, cataloging every fragment of iron, every shard of pottery. What they uncover is astonishing. 3 large halls, 5 smaller structures, all built in the same style as Norse settlements in Greenland and Iceland. There's a forge, a carpentry workshop, even a loom. The tools are unmistakably Viking. The architecture, the materials, the layout, it all points to one conclusion. This isn't Set, just any settlement. This is Vinland, and it's real. The world doesn't erupt in excitement, at least not immediately. Newspapers publish small articles. Academics debate the findings over coffee and pipe smoke. Some argue it's a temporary camp. Others insist it's proof of a larger lost Norse presence in North America. But the truth is, Landsog Meadows is just a piece of the puzzle, a single outpost, abandoned quickly, its purpose still unclear. Still, it changes everything. Because now the story of Vinland isn't just myth, it's history. So let's rewind again. Imagine yourself walking through the settlement as it might have looked during its brief life. The longhouse is the largest structure, stretching over 28 meters, nearly the length of a school bus. Its walls are made of timber and covered in thick layers of turf, insulated against the cold. Inside, the air smells of smoke and damp wool. A central hearth crackles, casting flickering light over wooden benches where the crew would have slept, eaten, argued, and dreamed of home. Outside, the wind howls across the bay. Seagulls wheel overhead, their cries echoing off the cliffs. The shoreline is rocky, dotted with driftwood and seaweed. Nearby, the forge glows with embers, where a blacksmith shapes nails and rivets for ships that will never sail again. In the workshop, someone sharpens an axe, the rhythmic scrape, scrape, scrape blending with the crash of waves. Life here is hard. The climate is harsher than Greenland. The soil is rocky. The trees are fewer than expected. And then there are the Skrællingar. You remember them from the last chapter. The Norse called them wretched ones, but they were anything but. They were the original inhabitants of this land, skilled, resourceful, and deeply connected to the environment. Their ancestors had lived here for thousands of years, navigating the coast in kayaks, hunting seals, gathering berries, and trading across vast networks. The Norse didn't see them as neighbors. They saw them as threats. And so, the meetings between the two groups were tense. At first, they traded. The Norse offered iron tools and weapons. The Skrællingar brought furs, hides, and food. But trust was fragile. One misunderstanding could spiral into violence. And eventually it did. A fight breaks out. A Norseman dies. The Skrællingar retreat, but not before making it clear this land is theirs. The Norse settlers grow uneasy. They argue among themselves. Some want to stay and fight. Others, wiser or more tired, know the odds. They pack their belongings, load the longships, and sail eastward, leaving behind the village and the dreams it once held. Lestandsog Meadows falls silent. The wind sweeps through the empty halls. Moss creeps over the stones. Time forgets the place, but not entirely. Because now, centuries later, you're here standing in the shadow of those ruins, imagining the lives that once filled them. The laughter around the fire, the arguments over salted meat, the quiet moments when someone stood at the edge of the sea wondering if they'd ever see Greenland again. And as you turn away, the sun finally setting, the sky deepening into indigo, you realize something. Vinland was never truly lost. It was just waiting. You're still standing at the edge of the ruins, the wind tugging at your sleeves, the last light of day clinging to the horizon. The settlement at Lansog Meadows feels like a whisper from the past, half heard, half forgotten. But it's not the whole story. Because if this was Vinland, why did the sagas describe it as lush and abundant? Why talk of grapes and endless forests when Newfoundland's rocky coastline offers neither? The answer, like most things in history, is complicated. Let's rewind again. This time, you're not an archaeologist or a Viking. You're a scholar, hunched over a desk in a dimly lit study, surrounded by crumbling manuscripts and the faint smell of old paper. The year is 1930, or maybe 1985. Time blurs when you're chasing ghosts. What matters is that you've got two sagas open in front of you, the saga of Eric the Red and the Greenlanders saga. Both were written centuries after the events they describe, passed down orally before being committed to parchment, and both are inconsistent. In one version, Leif Erikson discovers Vinland after being blown off course while sailing to Greenland. In another, he sets out deliberately, following rumors from a castaway. One saga says the land is full of grapes and self-sown wheat. Another mentions wild berries, salmon-rich rivers, and a forest so dense it swallows the sunlight. But then there's the third saga, a fragment really, where Vinland is cursed, haunted by strange noises and shadowy figures that drive men mad. You squint at the text, flipping between pages. Which one is true? None of them? All of them? The truth is, the sagas were never meant to be maps. They were stories, part history, part myth, part cautionary tale. But that hasn't stopped generations of historians from trying to decode them. Every detail becomes a clue. The description of a beach where a ship ran aground, the sound of waves crashing against cliffs, the scent of pine trees carried inland. And then there's Zetz, the name Vinland itself. If it truly meant wineland, then where are the vines? Grapevines don't grow in Newfoundland, but maybe the Norse saw wild strawberries or blueberries and called them grapes. Or maybe, just maybe, the real Vinland was further south. So you follow the trail. You imagine yourself sailing along the eastern seaboard, retracing the Norse route. You pass Nova Scotia with its fog-draped forests. You drift past Maine's rocky coast, where the trees lean into the sea like they're listening. Further south still, into the temperate forests of New England, where rivers teem with fish and the soil is rich enough to grow almost anything. This feels like the Vinland described in the sagas. But here sits the problem. The Norse never stayed. Why? Because Vinland wasn't empty. Because the Skrællingar weren't just passing through, they were everywhere. And unlike the Norse, they weren't temporary visitors. They were home. So when Thorfinn Karlsefni and his settlers tried to establish a permanent colony, they found themselves outnumbered, outmatched, out of option. Imagine the tension. The Norse, armed with iron weapons and foreign customs, trying to coexist with people who had lived in harmony with this land for millennia. The misunderstandings, the fear, the inevitable clashes. One story from the sagas tells of a group of Skrællingar approaching the Norse settlement, carrying bundles of furs. A trade is arranged. But then, a startled bull, a Norse animal, charges into the clearing. The Skrællingar scatter. Arrows fly. Someone dies. And just like that, the fragile peace shatters. The Norse retreat. They pack their belongings, load their ships, and sail eastward, leaving Vinland behind. Not because they couldn't stay, but because they wouldn't survive. Back in Greenland, the settlement struggles. Climate shifts make farming harder. Sea ice closes shipping routes. The dreams of Vinland fade into legend. And then something even stranger happens. The Norse forget not just the location of Vinland, the idea of it. Because in the centuries that follow, as Europe turns its eyes westward, the Norse sagas are dismissed as folklore. When Columbus sails west in 1492, no one remembers that a Viking once stood on American soil 500 years earlier. When John Cabot charts the coast of Newfoundland in 1497, he thinks he's the first to do so. Vinland is lost. Again. But not forever. Because now, you're here, standing at the edge of history, sifting through the fragments, trying to piece together a story that refuses to stay buried. And as the night deepens, as the wind whispers through the trees, you realize something strange. Vinland wasn't dead, just a place. It was a feeling, a promise of something better, a dream of greener pastures, a land that seemed close enough to touch, yet always just out of reach. So close your eyes. Let the waves rock you. Imagine the longships fading into the mist, their sails catching the last light of day. Feel the weight of history settle around you like a warm blanket, and drift. You're still standing in that dim study, surrounded by stacks of books and the faint scent of candle wax. Outside, the wind taps gently against the window pane like a finger drumming out a forgotten rhythm. You lean back in your chair, rubbing your eyes. The sagas are confusing enough on their own, but centuries of retellings have only made them stranger. Now you're not just chasing history, you're chasing ghosts. Because here's the thing about Vinland. Once it was forgotten, it didn't stay quiet. No, it seeped into the cracks of time, taking root in rumors, maps that led nowhere, and stories whispered by sailors who'd had one too many drinks. By the time Europe rediscovered North America, Vinland had become something else entirely. A myth, a warning, a place that shouldn't exist, but somehow always felt like it might. Imagine yourself at sea again. This time in the 16th century, you're a merchant captain, squinting into the fog as your ship cuts through the Atlantic. The water is gray and cold, the sky low and heavy. Your crew is restless, muttering about strange lights on the horizon, lights that vanish when you try to steer toward them. Someone swears they heard singing, low and haunting, carried on the wind. Another claims to have seen a longship drifting silently through the mist, its sails tattered, its deck empty. You dismiss it as sailor's superstition, but later, when you're alone in your cabin, you open your logbook and sketch the coast as you remember it, and somewhere in the corner, beneath jagged cliffs and rocky inlets, you add a name, Vinland, because you don't know why, but it feels familiar. This is how the legend survived. For centuries, maps kept hinting at a land that shouldn't be there. The Zeno map of 1558, drawn by an Italian nobleman, showed islands in the North Atlantic that no one had ever seen. One was labeled VINLAND. The Carta Marina of 1539, a sprawling nautical chart, marked a mysterious island called Estotaland, a name that sounds suspiciously like Eastotland or Eastland, a term used in the sagas. Some maps even included tiny settlements with Norse-sounding names placed in locations that made no sense. But these weren't set mistakes. They were memories. Like echoes bouncing off canyon walls, the idea of Vinland lingered in the minds of explorers, cartographers, and dreamers. It became a placeholder for the unknown, a way to fill in the blanks when no one knew what lay beyond the horizon. And then there were the ghost stories. In the fishing villages of Newfoundland, elders told tales of Skrællingar spirits haunting the woods, of ancient ruins where no one dared to camp. In Greenland, hunters spoke of phantom ships drifting past the icebergs, their crews silent and pale. Even in Iceland, where the sagas were born, sailors warned of a cursed land to the west, where the trees whispered secrets and the wind howled like a wolf. None of it was proof. But none of it was nothing, either. Fast forward to the 20th century. Lanzog Meadows has been discovered, but the mystery isn't solved. If anything, it's deepened, because if the Norse reached Newfoundland, where else might they have gone? Archaeologists start digging, not just in Canada, but across the northern Atlantic. In 2015, a team led by Sarah Parkak uses satellite imagery to spot strange markings in the forests of southern Newfoundland, rectangular shapes buried beneath the soil, hinting at a possible longhouse. They name the site Point Rosie, and for a moment the world holds its breath. Could this be real Vinland? Spoiler, probably not. Excavations reveal only a small ironworking site, likely used for repairing tools, not building a colony. But the search continues. Because here's the thing about history. It doesn't always stay buried. Every few years, someone finds something new. A shard of pottery, a rusted nail, a carved stone that might be a runestone. Each discovery sparks debate. Some historians argue it's wishful thinking. Others insist we're just scratching the surface. And so the legend grows again. Vinland becomes less of a place and more of a feeling, a promise, a story that refuses to die. Close your eyes now. Let the weight of centuries settle around you like a soft, heavy blanket. Imagine the fog rolling in over the bay, swallowing the longship's hull. Hear the distant cry of gulls. Feel the chill of the northern wind as it carries whispers from the past. Stories of explorers, of dreamers, of people who chased the edge of the map and found something they couldn't explain. And as the night deepens, as the fire in your imaginary hearth burns low, let yourself drift. Because sometimes the most powerful places aren't the ones we find. They are the ones we keep looking for. You're still sitting by that imaginary fire, the flames low and steady, casting soft shadows on the walls of your mind. Outside, the wind has quieted to a whisper like it's trying not to wake anyone. You're warm under your blanket, tea long gone cold beside you. And now, as the night deepens and your eyelids grow heavier, we take a step back from the myths and maps, the ghost ships and forgotten ruins, and instead imagine what it was really like to live in Vinland. Not just for a day, not even for a week, but for however long the Norse settlers tried to make this place home. So picture yourself waking up in one of those longhouses at Landsog's Meadows, or maybe another hidden settlement we've yet to find. The air is cool and damp, thick with the scent of earth and smoke. Light filters through cracks in the wooden beams, dancing across the rough-hewn walls. Someone nearby is already moving around, maybe sharpening a knife or poking at the embers in the central hearth to get the fire going again. There are no clocks here, no alarms. Time moves differently when your days are dictated by the sun, the tide, and how much work needs doing before winter arrives. You sit up slowly, stiff from sleeping on a wooden bench, covered only by a thin layer of straw and wool blankets. It wasn't exactly a memory foam mattress, but compared to the hard deck of a ship, it must have felt like luxury. Breakfast is simple. Dried fish soaked in water until it's soft enough to chew, some flatbread made from barley or rye, and maybe a bit of cheese if the cows were cooperating. There's no coffee, no toast with avocado, just food that fills you up and keeps you going. And trust me, you so need the energy, because living in Vinland wasn't a vacation, it was survival. The first thing everyone does after breakfast is check on the animals. Yes, the Norse brought cows with them, real ones, live ones, because apparently if you're going to settle a new continent, you don't leave without your dairy supply. They also brought sheep and goats, which they somehow managed to keep alive on a multi-week ocean voyage, packed in the middle of a wooden boat with 50 other people who probably smelled like salt and unwashed socks. Once on land, the animals were set loose to graze, and someone had to watch them, because while there weren't wolves or bears everywhere, there were wild animals and, more importantly, wild people. And nobody wanted their dinner wandering off into the woods or getting stolen by the locals. So while some of the crew tend to the livestock, others head out to fish. They use nets woven from plant fibers weighted down with stones, stretched between two boats or anchored to the shore. The sea here is full of life: cod, salmon, halibut, and everything else that swims. Fishing is easy compared to farming, especially since the soil in Newfoundland isn't exactly known for being fertile. Still, they try. They clear small patches of land, chop down trees with axes, and dig trenches for planting whatever seeds they brought with them. Maybe some cabbage, maybe some onions, definitely some herbs. But growing crops in rocky soil under unpredictable weather, not ideal. So they rely mostly on what they can catch, gather, or preserve. Which brings us to preservation techniques. Welcome to the world of salt, drying racks, and fermented everything. Food doesn't last long in a place without refrigeration, so the Norse mastered the art of making things last. Fish was salted and hung to dry. Meat was smoked or pickled. Milk was turned into cheese or sour whey. And then there was hakarl, that infamous dish of fermented shark meat that smells like regret and tastes like, well, let's just say it's an acquired taste. Thankfully, they didn't bring sharks with them, so maybe they skipped that one in Vinland. Instead, they drank water from nearby streams, brewed weak beer, and sometimes warmed milk with honey and spices to make something vaguely like mulled cider. Not fancy, but comforting. As the day stretches on, the work continues. Some people are building, repairing the longhouse, reinforcing the turf walls, sealing gaps with moss and clay. Others are maintaining tools, sharpening blades, patching sails, fixing broken oars. The blacksmith heats iron nails over the forge, hammering them into shape with slow, rhythmic precision. Sparks rise and vanish into the air like tiny stars. At some point, someone plays music. A flute carved from bone, a drum made from stretched hide, or maybe just someone humming an old tune from Greenland, the kind of melody that makes you homesick even if you're not sure where home is anymore. And then eventually the sun begins to sink again. The sky turns pink and orange, the clouds stretching wide like brush strokes on canvas. The longhouse grows quieter. People curl up on their benches, wrapped in woolen cloaks, listening to the crackle of the fire and the distant sound of waves against the shore. Some fall asleep quickly. Others lie awake, staring into the darkness, wondering if they'll ever see Greenland again, or if they even want to. Because despite the hardship, despite the isolation, despite the fact that this place is far from perfect, it sucks real. Vinland isn't just a legend or a myth or a map that leads nowhere. It's the place where people lived, where they worked, where they laughed, where they dreamed. You're still sitting by the fire, but now the smoke curls higher into the air and the crackling logs are slower, softer, like they're falling asleep too. Outside, the wind has gone quiet and the night feels deep, like it's holding its breath, waiting for you to listen. Because now, as we turn another page in this long-forgotten story, we shift our gaze not from the Norse who came from across the sea, but to the people who were already here. The ones who knew this land before anyone called it Vinland. Let's imagine a different morning. One that doesn't begin with the creak of wooden benches or the smell of salted fish. This time you wake up not inside a turf-walled longhouse, but beneath the open sky, wrapped in warm furs beside a river that sings as it winds through the forest. The sun is rising slowly, painting the treetops in gold. Birds call out their sleepy greetings. Somewhere nearby, a child laughs softly, and the sound is swallowed by the rustle of leaves in the breeze. This is your new life, for a little while at least, as someone who has always lived here. Someone whose ancestors walked these shores thousands of years before Leif Erikson ever set foot on them. You are part of a community that stretches across forests, rivers, and coastlines, a network of families and clans connected by trade, language, and tradition. You don't need maps to find your way. The stars, the currents, and the patterns of animal tracks are all the guidance you need. You know when the salmon will run, when the berries will ripen, when the ice will come, and most importantly, you know how to survive. Your home isn't made of timber and turf. It's made of birch bark, woven reeds, and animal hides stretched over a frame of saplings. These structures are light, easy to move, and perfectly suited to the seasons. In summer, you travel often, following the game and the fish. In winter, you gather together in larger groups, sharing stories around the fire, passing down knowledge that's older than memory. Today, though, is mild. A good day to work. You rise with the sun, stretch your arms toward the sky, and step outside. The world is damp with dew. Your boots, made of soft leather stitched with sinew, are quiet against the earth. Nearby, others are already moving, preparing food, tending to tools, checking fishing nets stretched across the shallows. Breakfast is simple but nourishing. Dried meat, softened over a low flame. Berries gathered yesterday and stored in birch bark containers. Maybe some roasted roots, dug fresh from the ground. There's no bread, no dairy, no spices brought from faraway lands, but there is flavor, salt from the sea, herbs gathered from the forest floor, smoke from the fire that clings to everything like an old friend. After eating, you head out with your family to check the traps along the riverbank. They're made of woven branches, shaped like cones and weighted down with stones. Inside you find fish, silver and slippery, wriggling in the dim light. Some you'll eat today, others you'll dry for later. Nothing is wasted. Later, someone brings back a freshly caught seal, its thick fur glistening in the morning light. The women and men who hunt share the catch freely. Meat is divided among families, and the bones and scraps are put to use, some carved into needles, others burned for fuel, others buried respectfully beneath the trees. There is a rhythm to this life, a balance. And then, one day, something changes. You hear it before you see it, the distant sound of oars cutting through water. A strange shape appears on the horizon, unlike any canoe you've seen before. It's large, wooden, and moves with sails that flap like the wings of a great bird. People stand on its deck, watching the shore with wide eyes. They look lost, but they are not helpless. They come ashore in smaller boats, dragging them onto the beach with ropes and shouts. Their clothing is heavy, layered in wool and metal. Their voices are loud, unfamiliar. Some of them carry weapons, not bows or spears like yours, but sharp blades and axes that glint in the sunlight. You've heard rumors of these strangers before. Others from upriver told stories of pale-skinned people who appeared suddenly, spoke in harsh tones, and vanished just as quickly. Some said they came from the north. Others thought they were spirits. Now you know the truth. They are real, and they are here. At first, there is curiosity, caution. You watch them from a distance, studying their movements, listening to their words. They seem confused by the land, by the weather, by everything that comes naturally to you. They build shelters out of wood and stone, not knowing that such permanence is unnecessary. They complain about the cold even when the air is mild. They struggle to find food where you see abundance, but they are clever in their own way. They offer things you've never seen before, iron tools, colorful cloth, beads that shimmer like sunlight on water. In return, they ask for furs, dried meat, and sometimes just conversation. You exchange gestures, sounds, pieces of meaning. Not everything translates, but enough does. Still, unease grows. Some among your people distrust them. They've seen what happens when outsiders arrive with promises and leave with more than they give. Others believe coexistence is possible if both sides understand their place. But understanding is fragile. One day, something happens. A misunderstanding, a theft, a fight. Arrows fly, voices rise, and just like that, the fragile peace breaks. The strangers retreat to their ships. You watch them go, unsure if they'll return, but you know this: they won't forget this place, and neither will you, because for a brief moment, two worlds touched, and then drifted apart again. You're still sitting by the fire, the glow of the embers casting soft shadows across your face. Outside, the night has gone quiet again, so quiet you can almost hear the stars breathing above the trees. Somewhere in the distance, an owl calls once, then twice, and then nothing. And now, as we turn the final pages of this long-forgotten chapter, we begin to see what happens after the longships vanish over the horizon. Because history doesn't always end with a bang. Sometimes it fades away like smoke in the wind. Back in Greenland, the Norse settlers who returned from Vinland carried more than just stories. They brought memories, warnings, maybe even nightmares. They spoke of strange lands and stranger people, of forests so thick they swallowed the sun, of battles that didn't feel like victories, and most of all, they carried something else: fear. Not fear of ghosts or monsters, but fear of the unknown. And so over time, the idea of Vinland began to change. What had once been a place of promise became a cautionary tale. A land too far, too wild, too dangerous. The sagas were written down, but not widely shared. Oral tradition kept the stories alive, but only among those who remembered. And when the Norse settlements in Greenland themselves began to fail, due to climate shifts, resource scarcity, and isolation, the last threads connecting them to Vinland unraveled. By the time Europe turned its eyes westward again, centuries later, no one remembered that Vikings had already stood on American soil. Vinland was gone. Again. But this time it wasn't set just forgotten. It was erased. Because when European explorers arrived in North America, this time with permanent colonies in mind, they didn't look for traces of Norse presence. They looked for natives, and in doing so, they often dismissed indigenous knowledge, traditions, and histories as folklore, or worse, as obstacles to progress. For hundreds of years, the story of the Americas was told through a European lens. And in that version, Christopher Columbus discovered a land that had never existed before. In that version, the first Europeans to reach North America were brave pioneers carving civilization out of wilderness. There was no room for Vikings, no room for Skrællingar, no room for the truth. And yet the truth was always there, buried beneath layers of myth and misunderstanding, waiting to be remembered. That's where modern historians come in, not just to uncover artifacts, but to reframe the entire story, to ask, who gets to tell history, whose voices have been silenced, and whose have been amplified? Because the legacy of Vinland isn't just about Vikings. Steps about how we understand the past. It's about recognizing that indigenous peoples were not passive characters in someone else's adventure. They were the original storytellers, the original scientists, the original navigators of a land they knew better than anyone else ever could. Today in Newfoundland and beyond, First Nations communities are reclaiming their own narratives. They're sharing oral histories that stretch back thousands of years. They're working with archaeologists to preserve ancient sites, not as tourist attractions, but as sacred places that hold memory. They's also telling new stories. Stories that include the Norse not as invaders or conquerors, but as visitors, curious, confused, sometimes clumsy in their attempts to survive in unfamiliar lands. And slowly the real Vinland begins to take shape, not as a single place, not as a mythical paradise, but as a meeting point. A crossroads between two worlds, one old, one younger, both shaped by the same winds, the same tides, the same endless search for home. So close your eyes now. Let the fire burn low. Imagine standing at the edge of that same shore again, watching the waves roll in under a sky full of stars. You see the longship disappear into the mist. You see the birch bark canoe glide silently along the riverbank. Two paths, one land, and a story that refuses to be forgotten. You're still sitting by the fire, wrapped in a blanket so soft it feels like being hugged by the night itself. The room is quiet now, just the occasional pop of a log in the hearth and the slow rhythm of your breath. Outside, the wind has gone to sleep too, leaving only the hush of trees swaying gently in their dreams. And as we come to the end of this long, winding journey, let's take one last moment to sit with everything we've uncovered. Vinland, a name that once meant Wineland but somehow became Wonderland, Warning Land, Wilderness Land, and finally Forgotten Land, but never truly gone. Because history doesn't vanish. It waits, sometimes buried beneath layers of peat and stone, sometimes hidden in the folds of old manuscripts, sometimes whispered around fires, passed from parent to child, not written down but remembered. And sometimes it lives in the way we tell stories. Because here you are right now, listening to a bedtime tale about Vikings and forests and ghost ships in the fog. A story that stretches across centuries, oceans, and cultures. A story that began with a few wooden boats and ended with satellite maps and archaeologists brushing dirt off ancient nails. That's the thing about history. It doesn't just belong to scholars or museums. It belongs to all of us. To every person who has ever looked at an old ruin and wondered, who was here before me? To every sailor who saw a strange light on the horizon and thought, could that be something real? To every child who heard a bedtime story and believed, even for a moment, that they were standing beside the sea, watching a long ship pull into the bay. Vinland teaches us something important. It reminds us that the world is bigger than what we know, that maps are never complete, that people move, explore, settle, and leave again, not always in straight lines, not always with grand intentions, but often out of curiosity, necessity, or just plain stubbornness. And most importantly, it reminds us that the past isn't set silent. Even when it sits forgotten, it speaks. In ruins hidden beneath moss, in songs carried through generations, in myths that hide more truth than we realize. So tonight, as your eyelids grow heavier and your thoughts begin to drift like leaves on a lazy stream, remember this. Vinland was never just a place. It was a moment, a fleeting connection between two worlds that didn't fully understand each other but tried. A dream of greener shores, a whisper from the edge of the map, and now a story you can carry with you into sleep. So close your eyes. Let the warmth of the fire wrap around you like a lullaby. Imagine the longships fading into the mist, the forest breathing in the dark, the stars blinking slowly above, and somewhere far away beyond time and tide, a shore where someone once stood, looking westward and wondering, "Good night, traveler. Thank you for coming along. Sweet dreams."